The small settlement was being plunged into a long shadow as the sun fell. The clank of Sir Richard's armour resounded through the deserted streets as he rode into town. The peasants had fled to their residences to seek refuge from the terror that had been prowling the countryside. Sir Richard felt the tension in the air as he got from his horse. With terrified expressions on their faces, the villagers flocked around him. They described a terrifying bear that had been terrorizing the settlement and the area nearby, murdering everyone who dared to get in its way. Sir Richard listened intently while observing the locals' faces. He could see the terror that had taken hold of their hearts and the fear in their eyes. Yet, he also noticed hope. They trusted him, this courageous knight who had already overcome so many obstacles, to protect them from the beast that had been terrorizing their country. They had a pledge from Sir Richard that he would stop the bear at all costs. He was aware that this would not be a simple undertaking, but he was committed to making it work. His attention was on the task at hand as he arose from his horse once more and rode off into the darkness. The trees in the dark, scary forest produced unsettling shadows on the ground. With his senses on high alert, Sir Richard rode deeper and deeper into the woods. He was aware that the bear might be hidden wherever and could pounce at any time. He abruptly heard rustling in the underbrush. In preparation for whatever might befall him, he pulled his blade. Yet it turned out to be merely a scared deer. After exhaling a breath of relief, Sir Richard started his voyage. Sir Richard continued to ride more into the woodland as the hours passed. His eyes went heavy, and he began to feel the effects of the journey's exhaustion. Yet he wasn't going to give up. He was aware that he had to keep moving forward in order to locate the bear before it could do any more damage. Sir Richard noticed a clearing when the first light of dawn peeked through the trees. His heart was racing as he rode in that direction. And there, in the clearing, was the bear. It had enormous size, pitch-black fur, and razor-sharp claws. With its jaws open, it roared and lunged towards Sir Richard. But Sir Richard was prepared. He prepared for the fight of his life by drawing his sword. With his sword at the ready, Sir Richard faced the beast. It was enormous, its black hair bristling with rage. Sir Richard had never before witnessed such cunning intellect in a wild animal until he saw it in its eyes. The bear slashed through the air as it charged at him with remarkable speed. Sir Richard avoided a fatal blow by dodging the onslaught. Although he swung his sword, the bear moved too quickly. It dodged the assault and again leapt at Sir Richard. Sir Richard and the bear traded punches in a heated encounter. Although Sir Richard was a capable knight, the bear was not a typical animal. It was unsurpassed in intensity and ferocity, and Sir Richard could feel the weight of the conflict. Sir Richard recognized he needed to alter his strategy as the sun sank. The bear was too strong for him to take on head-on, but he could outwit it. He turned away and drew the bear in the direction of the distant fortress. The castle was old, with grey stone walls that had endured for ages. Sir Richard was aware that the bear would be compelled to investigate the fortress' hidden crevices. He scaled the castle walls and waited there. The bear soon arrived, its curious eyes sparkling as it did so. It sniffed about the castle's perimeter looking for a door. Sir Richard kept a close eye on everything while waiting for the appropriate opportunity to act. Finally, the bear located a gap in the wall and forced its enormous body through. When Sir Richard noticed his chance, he leaped to the ground with his sword drawn. He sprang upon the bear's back and slashed it deeply with his sword. The bear shouted in pain as it attempted to push Sir Richard away. Sir Richard, nevertheless, persisted in his attempt to subdue the beast. The bear staggered through the fortress, losing strength with each passing second. Finally, Sir Richard struck the finishing blow. A final, deep roar was given out by the bear before it fell to the ground unmoving. Sir Richard was panting from exhaustion as he stood over the beast's carcass. Yet his triumph was fleeting. He was uneasy as he took in the surroundings of the castle. There was something strange and unsettling about the location. Sir Richard understood that this was just the start of his trip and not its conclusion. With the blood of the bear still flowing from his sword, Sir Richard stood inside the castle. But he had the impression that there was more to this tale. He was keen to learn the cause of the bear's size and intelligence, since he was aware that there must be a reason for it. He started to hear strange murmurs as he looked around the castle, as if the walls themselves were whispering to him. After becoming overtaken by curiosity, he followed the voices. Then he noticed it. There was a peculiar, shimmering crystal in the dungeon of the castle. Sir Richard could sense the force emanating from it as it pulsed with an alien vitality. Then, with a sly smirk on his face, he noticed the castle's lord standing near to the crystal. With his sword drawn, Sir Richard approached the lord. He asked to know the nature of the crystal and the rationale behind the lord's bear summoning. Sir Richard was informed that it was too late by the lord, who could only laugh. The bear was only the beginning for the crystal. Its work had already been completed. Sir Richard wouldn't give in. Before the lord could inflict more atrocities on the land, he realized he had to stop him. The lord pulled out his own sword, and the conflict began. Although Sir Richard was a well-known knight, the lord was a superb combatant. Each sword strike resounded throughout the dungeon as they clashed swords. Sir Richard battled tenaciously, driven by his passion to defend the defenseless and vanquish evil. Both of the males suffered critical injuries as a result of the fierce struggle. Sir Richard, though, was unyielding. He had before confronted death, therefore he was aware that he could not allow this beast to triumph. Sir Richard killed the lord in one final strike with his sword. The lord gave one more gasp and then fell to the ground lifeless. With his chest heaving with weariness, Sir Richard stood over the lord's body. Even though he had won the conflict, he understood that it was far from done. Knowing there will be numerous other battles, he took a look around the dungeon. Yet, he was prepared and resolved to confront whatever lay ahead of him with fortitude and courage. When leaving the castle, Sir Richard was still holding his sword. The land was bathed in a warm glow as the sun rose over the horizon. Though he was relieved that the fight was finally ended, he was also aware of how much work remained. In anticipation of news, the locals had congregated in front of the castle. Sir Richard approached them with blood and perspiration marks on his armor. He informed them that the beast was dead, that he had vanquished the castle's ruler, and that the evil that had been terrorizing the countryside had been put to a stop. The locals applauded, their faces growing hopeful. They expressed their gratitude to Sir Richard for his bravery and willingness to put himself at danger for their benefit. Sir Richard grinned, feeling happy that he had been able to improve their quality of life. He couldn't help but have the feeling that there was more to this tale as he rode away from the village. He was aware of the strength and intellect of the bear's crystal, which had been found in the castle's dungeon. Sir Richard had uneasiness. He was aware that there were further crystals like that one, additional sources of evil and dark power. He knew that he had to find them, to destroy them before they could wreak any more harm. With his sword by his side and a strong sense of purpose in his heart, Sir Richard then rode off into the sunlight. He was aware that there will be other conflicts and adversaries to deal with. Yet he was prepared and ready to go to any lengths necessary to defend the defenseless and subdue the forces of evil. He experienced a sense of calm as he was riding. He was aware that he had discovered his true calling in life and that it was his destiny to stand out for what was just and right. He continued riding into the abyss, prepared for whatever lay ahead. For days, Sir Richard rode while looking for any indication of the crystals he knew were present. He rode through thick forests and desolate wastelands, searching for any rumors or whispers that would point him in the direction of his objective. He came across a wide variety of animals and critters while riding. He fought off wolf packs as well as enormous spiders. He engaged in combat with trolls, goblins, and even a dragon. But despite his best efforts, he was unable to locate any evidence of the crystals. He became frustrated and worn out, and he began to question if he was following a wild goose. Then he encountered an odd old woman. She had wild, unruly hair and was wearing torn clothing. He was relaxing by a river when she approached him and informed him that she knew what he was looking for. Notwithstanding his skepticism, Sir Richard chose to give her a chance to speak. She told him that she had seen a crystal like the one he was seeking for, deep in the middle of a mountain range to the north. Sir Richard was appreciative for the information and headed off for the mountains. The route was hazardous, with sheer cliffs and winding pathways. Sir Richard, though, was adamant about finding the gem and destroying it. He sensed a weird force pulsating through the air as he got closer to the mountain's core. He was aware of his proximity. Then he noticed it. The crystal was enormous and radiated an unearthly light. A gang of ferocious ogres wielding swords and axes stood guard over it. Sir Richard understood that he had to move quickly. With his blade shining in the sunlight, he charged at the ogres. Sir Richard and the ogres traded blows in a bloody battle. Yet because of Sir Richard's fighting prowess, he was able to eliminate the ogres one by one. Finally, he took a position over the crystal with his sword drawn. With one fast strike, he smashed the crystal, breaking it into 1,000,000 fragments. Sir Richard was relieved as the energy that had been surging through the air vanished. His task had been accomplished. He had smashed the crystal, putting an end to the danger of darkness over the region. He was at calm and content as he took in the view of the mountain range. But he was aware that this was just the start. Other crystals existed, serving as additional hubs for evil and dark magic. With his sword by his side and a purposeful heart, Sir Richard rode forth into the sunset. Even though the quest was far from done, he was prepared and ready to take whatever actions were necessary to defend the defenseless and drive out the forces of evil.